The Endeavor is the new roller coaster symmetric coming from Brunswick on February 22nd. If you're an adrenaline junkie, you'll want to pay attention. I'm bowling on the Kegel Chromium lane condition that we always use for testing. It's a challenge pattern at just under a 7-to-1 ratio. It's 42 feet long, 25.5 mils. That puts it on the heavy side of medium for both volume and length. It's not as easy as a house shot, but not as punishing as a sport pattern. I also have my layout information up on the screen in both languages. I'm sticking with the 5x2 layout. Typically, I've been drilling the higher RGs a little stronger, but the B7 stuff has been strong and punchy so far, so I didn't think I needed to help anything with the layout. Very glad I did what I did here, as you'll see. I'm throwing everything out of the box now to help give you an idea of if you can do the same, or if a surface adjustment might be needed. The Endeavor comes shiny, and I'm not going to save this to create any suspense. It has to be the most responsive ball I've ever thrown. This thing was uncontrollably fast until I got into the deeper zones, so if that's what you want or need, leave it alone, but I really think most people are going to want to hit this ball with a 3000 pad. 4000 won't do enough, and 2000 goes too far away from what the ball wants to do. I think 3000 is the perfect place to create a little more control or blend while still letting it fly. As I've begun doing, I'm going to give you the details first while we watch to get your eyes warmed up, then we're going to run it back and tackle it zone by zone to talk about the adjustments I made when moving around, where it felt the most comfortable, where it felt like I had to help it the most, so on and so forth, just to get deeper and give you a much better idea where it's going to fit both for me and for you. First of all, we're going to retire the straighter zone. It's just an unnecessary struggle to fling the ball down the lane that provides zero value to the review or to you. So no more second arrow going forward because it's obviously just dumb, especially with the Endeavor. Next, help me once again thank the brands of Brunswick who have stepped up to make sure that you'll get to see every release in my hands going forward. However, they're just sending bowling balls. I'm not on staff, so this nose will stay as bright and freckly as it always has, and I'm a Scotch guy, not a Kool-Aid guy, so it's still business as usual. I know that I'm one of the last ball review boomers that hasn't switched over to the live com style, but there would have to be some heavy editing because there were a lot of non-YouTube friendly words and phrases uttered throughout filming for this one. The Sesame Street word of the day for the Endeavor is backend. This is Sir Mix-a-Lot's favorite bowling ball. There's enough junk in the trunk of this ball to necessitate a special 2-part episode of Hoarders, and there are all kinds of other equally advertiser-unfriendly sentiments I could express, but let's get something accomplished here. The cover is the Activator Plus 3.0 Pearl cover from the Attitude. The solid version was also on the Teal Rhino Pro, so more of a medium to medium high strength cover. The new tiered hexagon core comes in at a 254 RG and an 045 differential in 15 pounds, so on paper this is a very Spectre, Revenant, Wolverine type of ball, just a few points lower on the differential, but on the lane the extra flare isn't missed or needed, and this ball is quite a bit stronger than any of those that I just mentioned. Like I expressed in the recent Exponent Pearl video with Zach, while the literature says this is a medium to light oil ball, I think you can just chuck that out the window. This thing is a crazy skid flip beast that's not far off being a theorem, and that's actually going to be the comparison for this video. At the same time, it's not necessarily that it's actually a super strong ball, it's just that the friction response is so high that if you feed it friction, it's going to go nuts, and it's also surprisingly stable in the oil. I threw it all over the place, and it was surprisingly consistent. Usually when you get a ball this flippy and this responsive, it's virtually allergic to oil because that's part of creating a responsive ball in the first place. You need it to hydroplane somewhat to create that big move off the dry, because if it gets too much traction in the oil, that then creates blend. This ball does slow down a little if I fade it or keep it in the oil more, but the big thing is that it doesn't get wiggly or weak. The motion and move into the pin stays strong, consistent, and very assertive. Much like the theorem and much like Ricky Bobby, it just wants to go fast. Okay, now to really attempt to be productive, just laughably fast from the straighter zone. There's no point to this whatsoever, it's just for the memes. It hits the lane and screams sideways. Moving in a little, this is still just a straight up dump fest. I got a couple to get there and knock pins down, but these were not well executed shots. We're just flinging it at this point to try to get it down the lane. Not anything that's going to be consistent or effective, just illustrating ball reaction still. I tried several different things, I tried some different angles, getting softer, throwing it harder, but if I know that the ball is just going to be too strong from where I'm at, I don't have the fine motor control yet to throw it hard and get any kind of decent roll on it. It's just going to be a chuck or a dump. Another zone in, and we're starting to find some reasonable territory where I can actually slow down a little and try to make some shots. Again, still very fast, very responsive, but I have enough angle now where I can keep it inside the friction and just pray to dear 8-pound, 6-ounce newborn infant Jesus that it gets down the lane. With some angle and a bit more oil to work with, now we're in business, and it gets pretty fun to just give it a super soft-handed float and watch it pick up and drive like I'm EJ Tackett. Into the deepest zone, and it's still moving. It wasn't until I got in here that I could throw it normally or more comfortably, and I still even had to be a little more spinny or up the back of it than I wanted because it wants to be very continuous. There's no jerk stop or rolling out despite the friction response. Even when I did dead-hand it or come straight up the back, it tried to pick up and go hunting for the 10-pin. I'm not sure when I'm going to get to use this ball or what I'm going to use it on, but it's just way too much fun. It's again ultimately a medium to medium high strength ball. You'll see the difference here when I compare the Theorem, but it is a step down from the stronger, clean, and sharper ASIMs. Judging length is difficult because of how responsive it is. If you feed it a bunch of friction early, it's going to be crazy early, but if you give it some oil, it does get pretty long, so it's technically fairly clean. And of course, it maxes out the friction response. I really can't think of anything that's close to this sharp outside of the Theorem. Not the virtual energy blackout, not the altered reality, not the Zen Gold label. There's just nothing that SPI has made for years that approaches this as far as friction response, which is kind of weird to say since they've always been known as the skid flip company. Now taking a look at the Theorem, a very similarly comical from straighter, just all kinds of boom, so we won't waste any time here. The Theorem is also very responsive, but you can see the stronger roll. The Endeavor tries to be clean or easier down the lane, but as soon as it finds friction, that's what makes it go. The Theorem with the stronger asymmetric core starts rolling and revving earlier, so it blends the wet-dry line just the slightest bit more, but is also still an incredibly responsive ball. The reactions are similar, it's the same very quick, round, continuous, powerful acceleration on friction, but it's obvious that the Endeavor is the step down on overall strength. It's interesting to see the difference that a core creates in two otherwise visibly identical shapes and looks. The Theorem does all the same things in all the same zones. I had to do the same things physically. It did the same things on the friction and the oil, just obviously more core strength. An earlier, more stable roll which rounds out the shape ever so slightly, and still makes the Theorem the obviously stronger ball, though again not by as much as you'd expect. Chart time again, a little strength difference. The Theorem is about as strong of a shiny ball as you're going to get. The Archetype Hybrid and Exotic Gem are the only two I can think of that are stronger. Plenty of length, but again, the Endeavor is the slightly longer ball, plus the slightly more responsive ball as well. Both are big skid flip monsters, but again, shockingly consistent and predictable for how sharp they are. At the end of the Theorem filming, I went stuff 10, stuff 9, drive by 8, and then I couldn't leave a 7-pin. I kept trying after I turned the camera off and couldn't fluff it enough. The shiny B7 stuff is extremely impressive in oil, just zero wiggle or over skidding. Flipping back and forth on the way out, the Theorem of course is available now, and the Endeavor once again releases on February 22nd with Track's big wow factor shiny ASIM Archetype Hybrid, plus Brunswick's surprising Ultimate Defender, and a ball that nearly maxes out on overall strength in Columbia's Pure Madness. I have reviews for all those as well. Down in the description is a link to Bowler's Mart that will get any of the balls featured in this video ordered for you. I do have to note, of course, that I do receive a 5% commission on all sales through the links. And of course, don't forget my code ROSEDOLL10 to get 10% off your order at checkout at CoolWick. Thanks for watching, and may the strikes be with you.